So guys, today I would like to talk about an extremely important discovery in the city of Ashkelon. Just to give you an idea, Ashkelon is located just outside of the Gaza Strip, north to the Gaza Strip. Here on Google Maps you can see exactly where it is located. So, in 2013, archaeologists have found a burial site where they were able to excavate the remains, the bones that were found. And two things were special about this burial place. First of all, it was very old, so it was dating back to the Bronze Age, at least some of the remains. Then there were some that were from the Iron Age and also from the 9th century BC. But there were certainly some parts of the burial that were from the Bronze Age. And then the second thing that was important about it, that it was very unique because it was not a mass burial site, as it was very common to bury people during the Canaanite times. This is how Canaanites buried people in mass graves. And just to give you a perspective, if we go back to the Bronze Age, those territories, so the city of Ashkelon, as you can see on the map, would be controlled by the ancient people of the Philistines. Remember them? If you read the Bible, you can often read about them in the Old Testament. They were the big enemies of the kingdom of Israel, and there were many stories that the Philistines were the main characters. Probably my favorite story is the story of Samson, as he killed 1,000 Philistines with a jaw of a donkey. But it is important to understand that the Philistines were a separate group of people, quite distinct from the Canaanites living in the land. And actually the Bible, when it mentions the Philistines, it presents them as a separate group. And we see this again in the story of Samson, for example, because when he informs his parents that he's going to take a wife of the Philistines, then his father replies, "Are there not enough daughters among our people? Do you have to take a daughter of the people that are not circumcised?" Now, in the Bible, the practice of circumcision started really with the great father of the Hebrews, so Abraham. But actually, this practice became quite popular in the Middle East. And even in Egypt, where the Hebrews were slaves for many years, the Egyptian priests were circumcising themselves when they served gods. And this is quite logical when we follow the biblical narrative. Abraham had, of course, many sons. Isaac was the chosen son, but he had other sons, for example, Ishmael. And it is easy to imagine that he would also teach other sons that it is important to circumcise. So being not circumcised is actually a distinct feature of the Philistines, and this is how the Bible describes them, as being not circumcised. But why am I telling you all of this? Well, I am telling you all of this because currently there are many misconceptions, many misunderstandings as to the origins of the Palestinians and who are they exactly. And there are many different ideas. So let's look at this situation now, having this background. So I'm sure you heard this claim that the modern Palestinians trace their origin to the Philistines. After all, the territory of Gaza is exactly where the territory of the Philistines were. And also the name Philistine and Palestinian sounds pretty similar. So first, let's talk about the name. Palestine, Palestinians, where those names come from. Well, to trace the name, we actually have to go back to the Roman Empire times. And in the 1st and 2nd century AD, there were two Jewish revolts against the Roman Empire that had a tremendous impact on the shape of the region in the following years. After the Romans crushed the Jewish rebellions, Emperor Hadrian decided that the name of the region will be changed. It will change from Judea to Syria Palestina. Why that name? Well, the best guess is that Hadrian wanted to punish the Jewish people, and he named the region after the most famous enemies of the Hebrew people, so the Philistines. And this is where probably we get the name Palestine from. Now, because the Roman Empire was such an influential entity, the name Palestine stuck quite well. But it was not always called this region, Palestine, after the Roman rule. And actually, during the Arab rule of the region, it could have not been called Palestine, because in Arabic there is no letter P that is used. So it would be very illogical to use a name that you can't pronounce in your language. And it must be said that there never was a kingdom or a country called Palestine. No, this region was always part of some kind of empire, like the Roman Empire, like the Ottoman Empire. And on these territories, you actually had peoples of many different ethnic backgrounds living together. And this, of course, includes many Jews. Why we know this? Because we had the Crusaders who came to the Holy Land, and actually they slaughtered a lot of the Jewish population of the Holy Land. And I want to stress here strongly that the name Palestine did not refer to the actual people that lived in the land when it was created by Hadrian, because by that time the Philistines were long gone, and there was no Philistines living in the land of Israel at that time. But let's go back to the discovery in Ashkelon, because it is very important that we understand the origins of the Philistines. As we already mentioned, they were often described as being distinct in the Bible, being uncircumcised, which was uncommon at that time in the Holy Land. So the bones of the skeletons found in Ashkelon were actually tested using DNA tests. And what they found is that the DNA sampled from the early Iron Age burials had a European genetic component that set the people apart from the local Bronze Age Canaanite population. So the Philistines' DNA was very different from the DNA of the people that lived in the land of Israel. So the Philistines were not related genetically to the people living in the land, which is reinforced by the descriptions in the Bible, which describes the Philistines as being separate, different from the people living in the land. So the question is, where did they come from? Where did the Philistines come from if they were not originally from Canaan? So the genetics told us that they were of European descent. But where exactly in Europe? Well, again, archaeology and the study of ancient sources is a help in understanding exactly where they came from. So, of course, archaeologists not only found the bones, but also many other things that are related to the culture of the Philistines. For example, they found a lot of pottery. And when they started to study the shapes, the colors of the pottery, it came really obvious that this pottery that was found in the territories that were settled by the Philistines is very similar, almost exactly similar, to the pottery found in the Aegean region. The name Aegean refers to the sea, a sea that is close to Greece. So the Philistines would come from, for example, Crete or Greece or other island in this region. And as they settled in Canaan, they created a sort of a colony and created their own culture that was very different from the culture that was in the land. And this is very evident in the cities that they lived. The archaeology proves that they were different. For example, they found many bones of dogs and pigs that were found there. And this shows that they had a different diet even than the people of the land. So they were eating dogs and they were eating pigs, which was quite popular in the Roman and Greek culture. So, if somebody tells you that the Palestinians are Philistines and they have a very ancient history connected to the land, well, first of all, it is not true, because the name has nothing to do with the people that lived in the land. And second of all, even if it was true, then that would mean that the Palestinians would have to go back, if they want to go to their homeland, somewhere in the Aegean region. Besides, they did DNA tests of the Palestinians, and it came about that it's a very diverse group, and it's not very homogeneous. So they come from different parts of the world. And this really is supported by the history. If you study the history of this land, that many peoples were brought to this land from distant lands, then they lived here, then they emigrated, and because of this, the genotype of the Palestinians is so diverse. So they have this name Palestinian, but it actually doesn't mean anything, but it's because it's an artificial name created by the Romans to anger the Jews, and it doesn't correspond to actually what was in the land, because there was never a kingdom of Palestine. There was never a country of Palestine. So if somebody tells you that the Jewish people came here, there was this Palestine, this country, and they kicked out from their own country the people that lived here, well, it's not true if you want to go back to the history and understand actually what has happened here. The truth is that in the land of Israel, as it is called in the Bible, and Jews always lived in this land. Sometimes there was more Jewish people, sometimes there was fewer of them because of crusades, for example, the killing of them. But the Jewish people have a very ancient connection to this land. I think the most ancient connection to this land of any of the people that live currently on those lands. So I just wanted to make this clear so that people understand certain concepts, and when people throw at you certain terminology, so that you can actually tell them what is the truth. So thank you so much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I am so happy to see that the last video I did was so interesting for you. I am really encouraged by all the comments you left, and wonderful. I will try to give you also those updates from Israel, because I saw that many people are interested in that. Thank you for all your support, for your prayers for Israel at this time. We are still during war, and we need prayers for sure. Thank you for supporting the channel. This has been a wonderful, wonderful blessing for me. I'm very, very thankful to everybody who decided to support me on Patreon. If you would like to support the channel through Patreon, if you think that my work is helpful, you can do that. I will leave a link in the description of this video. Thank you so much for everything. Have a good day. Shalom.